We'll get to that breaking news now. Just in the last few minutes, Andy Burnham has been blocked from running in the Gorton and Denton by-election. That's according to sources close to the Labour's National Executive Committee. Well, yesterday, the Manchester mayor announced his intentions to run, which was backed by the former Deputy Leader Angela Rayner and current Deputy Leader too, Lucy Powell. But many feared it would threaten Starmer's leadership. Let's dissect what has gone on in the last 60 minutes now. With me is the commissioning editor for The Spectator, Lara Brown, and the political commentator, Andy Twelves. Wow. I mean, this is not just a big statement from the NEC. It was an overwhelming vote. Andy, by 8-1, Andy Burnham's been blocked.
Yeah, on a panel of 10, we'll see Shabana Mahmood as chair of the NEC abstained, as is tradition, but 8-1, only Lucy Powell, the deputy leader and kind of ally of Andy Burnham, backing him. I am genuinely shocked. You know, you had GMB union representatives on there, USDAW representatives, you know, allies in Parliament of Andy Burnham, and they didn't back him. Keir Starmer on that panel voting against him. I think when we look back on this moment in 5 or 10 years, this will be the end of the Keir Starmer premiership. This has left him exposed to the right of the party and the PLP. This is an absolute sign of weakness. The fact he didn't even abstain on this. He's so insecure in his position that he's thrown away a guaranteed win in a parliamentary by-election. You know, Reform UK, they deserve to win it now, given the fact that because of his ego and his factional priorities, we've thrown away an outstanding candidate that would have won and would have contributed to our government and our party, and we've thrown it away because Keir Starmer's worried about his position in Labour 10. That is not country before party, that is party before country. I'm ashamed to be a member of the Labour Party.
Wow. I mean, this is an astonishing moment, Lara, because ultimately, allies around Keir Starmer will think, we've won this temporary battle. But as Andy's saying, I mean, might this lose him the war?
I think it might. The thing to remember is, in a few years' time, Keir Starmer is going to go to the country and say, you have to vote for me, because if you don't vote for me, you risk reform getting in. And risking reform is the worst thing that you can ever do. And I'll try and tell us that Farage is in bed with Putin, etc., etc. But in making this decision, Keir Starmer is risking and probably handing a seat to reform, which seems like huge hypocrisy. If you look at the polling, I still think this was a hard seat for Labour to win, but Burnham had a very good chance at winning it. Pretty much no one else does now. You're going to have a lot of Labour voters who go to the Greens. They'll do quite well. Odds are now Reform will walk away with this seat quite comfortably, which will significantly increase their parliamentary presence. And the NEC has just decided that they would rather try and shore Keir Starmer up, save him from the costs of dealing with Burnham in Parliament, than deprive Reform of a seat. That's a huge decision.
Andy, what do you make of the argument that allies of Keir Starmer will be making, no doubt, for the rest of the day, perhaps for many, many days to come in the run-up to this by-election, that Andy Burnham would be a big distraction, that this would create sort of psychodrama in Parliament, that this wouldn't be the sort of sensible or pragmatic thing to do, because all it would do is open the leadership up to a long, long period of uncertainty, instability, a sort of will he stand, won't he stand circus around Westminster?
I think a distraction would be welcome, to be honest with you. You know, we're, in third place in the polls, battling with the Green Party. I think a distraction and a break would be absolutely welcome. I think it's ridiculous as well. These National Executive Committee members, they're up for election this year. It's the internal democracy year for the Labour Party. Abdi Diwali won't be seeing his seat again. The other CLP section members of the NEC won't be seeing their seat again. The members are going to take this absolutely awfully, because what we're going to have a Reform UK won by-election, and then we're going to get trashed by Reform UK at the May local elections in the space of 6 weeks. That is going to absolutely destroy party morale and will destroy Keir Starmer's premiership. So he's decided, instead of at least winning the by-election and then giving an uptick to the activists for the May elections and then going, he's decided that we're going to lose a by-election, going to lose the May elections, and then he's going to go. I cannot understand this decision at all. It is absolutely ridiculous.
Well, I suppose it can be viewed through the very short-termist prism of political survival. I mean, could Keir Starmer really have done anything else today if he wanted to remain Prime Minister after May?
Well, there are a few things about how today went. In a perfect world, Keir Starmer would have had the votes without himself having to intervene. My understanding is he was on the panel, we had 9 votes, therefore we know Lucy Powell went against, therefore he must have voted. I think he should be able to claim some distance from the NEC. That is quite shocking. To be charitable to Starmer loyalists, they're going to claim, I reckon, in the next few months that it would have been very expensive to have a by-election in Manchester for the mayoralty. It would have cost a lot of money, about $5 million for the taxpayer, and Reform might have won it. And they're going to claim that it would have been very bad for the economy to have the markets anticipating a socialist leader coming in, and the sort of change that would happen from the moment Burnham came in. But I don't think this is good for Starmer. We're acting like Burnham is the only threat to Starmer's regime, and that is just not true. Starmer is his worst enemy, and at this point, he'll bring himself down in May. Doesn't really matter who's there to pick up the pieces. He's just cut one of the contenders for the crown after he's gone.
Well, it does seem like there is a sort of air of certainty almost about the fact that there will be a challenge to Keir Starmer. What form will that now take?
I imagine it'll come through the members of the cabinet coming to him after the May elections and doing a, if you don't go, we'll go, threatening mass resignations of the cabinet. I imagine probably Wes Streeting will try and get his ducks in order. Angela Rayner will try and get her ducks in order. Maybe Shabana will try as well. But I imagine deals will be made. I imagine there'll be a left candidate and a kind of centrist candidate. Wow. And they'll come to him and go, you've got to resign, otherwise, you'll see like the dying days of the Boris Johnson government, where it was, resignations every 10 minutes. You saw secretaries of state, ministers, junior ministers, PPSs resigning. I imagine that'd be the kind of possibility that he'd be faced with after May. I
mean, it's a weighty time. Let's just focus in on this by-election now, because we know one thing about it, and that's that Andy Burnham won't be a candidate. But there have been lots of names that have been floated about the other parties. So Reform, it could be that Zia Youssef stands to be an MP for the Reform Party. It could be that the new leader of the Green Party, Zach Polansky, stands for the Greens. We know that George Galloway will be standing for the Workers' Party of Britain, his party that got, I think, 10% of the vote in this largely Muslim constituency.
And that was the paper candidate. They didn't do any leafleting, so see them run properly, they'll do very well.
So this will be a fascinatingly high-profile by-election, despite the exclusion of Andy Burnham.
This is going to be a really key by-election. I think Polansky would be making a big mistake to run on it. I think he would find Parliament to be a huge time sink. It's difficult for the Greens to win. If I were him, I'd go run for mayor. But that aside, we're basically going to see what happens to the left vote when they leave the Labour Party, which is what they will do here. A lot of them will go to the Workers' Party. George Galloway is a brilliant campaigner. He will push a left-wing socialist message on some people and a pro-Gaza Palestinian message on others, and he will unite a coalition there. The Greens will run as, look, Labour's done, here's your alternative, and then Reform will run on immigration. Labour don't have a position on those issues. No one knows where they stand. They're going to get pushed out. But this by-election, I think, will tell us a lot about where the country is going to go and what it will look like at the general. It's a very, very key indicator.
Isn't it fascinating that we're talking about this by-election as an almost certain loss for the Labour Party when their majority at the general election in this seat was absolutely enormous? The second-place party, which was Reform, they were nowhere close. They got about 5,000 or 6,000 votes in that seat. I mean, we are talking about what on paper should be one of the safest seats in the country for Labour. And we're just sitting here as if the deal is done. It's already over for them. They've lost the seat.
Well, it's like Runcorn by-election. You've got that incumbency bias where you've had an MP in there for 10+ years who's built up those community relations and it's his seat as much as it is Labour's seat as well. And I think, obviously, the different situation of why Andrew Gwynn has left his parliamentary seat as they did in Runcorn, it wasn't a criminal matter. He just was too ill to continue. So I think there is that. But I just can't see them getting out activists in Greater Manchester, especially now, because Andy Burnham is the de facto leader of the North West Labour Party. They've banished his man, so why would you go out on a freezing cold morning, on a Saturday morning when you could be at home, and go out and send leaflets and pack envelopes? Why would you do that? They'll struggle with the manpower.
You said that Labour almost deserved to lose this seat. Do you think that would be a widely held view within the rank-and-file Labour Party?
Yeah, I think activists who would go out of their way to go and campaign for Andy Burnham in that seat because they knew that they would win it, won't now. I think everyone will go, you know what, why would we go out of our way? I live in London, why would I get the train up to Manchester and then the train out to Denton to go and campaign for a candidate that's been installed by the NEC when the popular candidate, when the right candidate has been blocked?
Lara, one party that we haven't mentioned, of course, is your party, the slightly amorphous, leaderless left-wing group that had a bit of a haphazard launch earlier last year. They're probably going to field a candidate. It's interesting that they're absolutely nowhere in anyone's considerations.
I mean, your party seemed like a good idea at the time. There probably was space in the landscape for a hard-left, young-oriented party fronted by Jeremy Corbyn. That definitely would have done well. I reckon 10% of the vote would have been feasible for them to get. But they've bungled their launch. They've accused each other of being sexist and anti-Semites and this and that. They've discovered that taking, one faction from Labour guarantees that once they're alone, they will split into 4 or 5 factions. I mean, I reckon they'll have a really, really hard time picking a candidate. They're having a fight over slates at the moment in their executive elections. But yeah, there'll be someone there. They'll get almost no votes. They won't be significant in the grand scheme of things.
Fascinating how the Green Party has sort of taken on that mantle and now has a relatively significant position. But of course, this all feeds into a wider sense that, Andy, as you were discussing earlier, the Labour Party is in 3rd place in the national polls now. This by-election will be a sort of microcosm of that, but there are votes in Scotland, in Wales, and in many council areas, those that haven't been cancelled, some council elections across England. All of London, for instance, is voting. And Labour control many councils there. I mean, it's not beyond the realms of possibility that Labour could lose every single council in London.
I don't think we'll lose every single council. In Zone 1, for example, there are lots of young Labour voters. But I think, looking at Wales, for example, I think there's a really good chance we could lose that. To be honest, to Plaid Cymru or to Reform or to Plaid Green, in Scotland, I don't think we'll win that. I think, it'll probably go SNP again. But I just cannot understand the logic of this decision. Like I said, even with activists, why would you go out and ruin their morale ahead of what are going to be a really difficult set of local elections? I cannot fathom how Keir Starmer has a job past May the 7th.
Does this, in some ways, build Andy Burnham up as a sort of greater figure of resistance now for people that are really dissatisfied with the way that Keir Starmer's leading the Labour Party? I mean, if he's sort of a real possibility there, sort of he's seen as more of a real person, perhaps with flaws and everything else, but now he's going to be the candidate that could have won, but we'll never see whether he could have won. It might increase his power.
I think Burnham was becoming a slightly comic figure around the time of conference because the view was, once a year you say, I should be leader. You can't be leader. You're not an MP. Put your money where your mouth is. Run in a difficult by-election or at a general and then let's talk. And now he's been martyred. We now know that Burnham isn't allowed to enter Parliament through the route of the Labour Party. I reckon there'll be some speculation if he'll go independent, by the way. I don't think he will, but there'll definitely be talk. And therefore he can say whatever he wants about Keir Starmer. He doesn't have to keep him on side for a potential by-election. That's out of the window. And he can't be accused of not trying to be an MP. This is great. I think he will come to control the North in a large anti-Starmer bloc, which will stop them from winning elections for the next few years.
That's an interesting point that you raise. Andy, do you think it would be wise for Andy Burnham to stand as an independent candidate? Could he win as an independent candidate? So I'm thinking back to the first ever London mayoral election when Ken Livingstone was blocked from being the Labour Party's candidate by Tony Blair. He stood as an independent, won, and then became Labour anyway. I mean, Andy Burnham, that's not beyond the realm of possibility, or am I stretching credulity?
Of course, I value my Labour Party membership very much, so I would never endorse another candidate. But I think, Kevin Livingstone had a pretty successful run in London. And if, we saw this actually when the Labour Party was founded, you had split off to the Manchester Labour Party or the Rotherham Labour Party or the London Labour Party. You had these regional collectives and they were pretty successful. So I think if he did run as the Manchester Labour Party or as a Manchester Independent, I think he would still win. Andy Burnham has surpassed the Labour Party in Greater Manchester. He had the mandate of heaven. He won every single ward, the 200-odd wards that it was, the Greater Manchester mayoral election. He is Manchester. I think if he did run as an independent, he'd win.
That is a fascinating thought there. We'll have to keep close eyes on what Andy Burnham decides to do himself, because, of course, as you say, he's got this personal brand there in Manchester that in some ways, well, actually is definitely more popular than the Labour Party at this point in time. I don't think that's particularly controversial to say. Well,